She was 20, a psychology student who believed memory could heal more than medicine ever would. One rainy afternoon she walked into room 214 for a research session and was never seen again. No witnesses, no struggle. Just an empty chair and a silver pen left on the desk. 19 years later, a new professor walks into that same classroom, same building, same door number. She writes her name on the board. Dr. Claire Donovan. The students stare in silence, because that was the name of the girl who vanished from this campus nearly 2 decades ago. This is the story of two sisters, one who never stopped searching and one who forgot she was ever lost. Before we begin, tell me, where in the world are you watching from? I read every single comment, and I truly love seeing where you're all joining from. Rain stitched thin silver lines across the campus, a soft hiss under the low hum of sodium street lamps. The University of Oregon's brick facades looked soaked in memory, ivy darkened, windows haloed, the neon open of a late-night cafe blinking like a tired eye. Inside McMillan Hall, room 214, the projector fan whirred and a clock ticked with the persistence of someone counting years, not seconds. Students filed in shaking off umbrellas, the smell of wet denim and paper rising like steam, desks pressed close like shoulders on a crowded bus. A flyer on the corkboard, Missing Persons Vigil, Friday 7th p.m., had been half torn. Only the word missing remained, ragged and loud. Someone had drawn a small heart in the margin and then scratched it out. Down the corridor, custodial carts rattled past. The floor carried faint chalk dust, as if the room itself kept writing and erasing the same lesson. A radiator's cough echoed through pipes. The lights flickered once, twice, reminding everyone that buildings age, that wiring grows tired, that nothing holds the same charge forever. Near the lectern sat a silver pen, University of Oregon logo, faded to a pale oval. It looked like it had been set down in a hurry and never picked up. The pen belonged to a story, even if no one in the room knew it yet. Across campus, the train sounded its distant horn, the note that always felt like leaving. The door to room 214 was closed, but unlocked. On the glass, Rain drew slow question marks. A student leaned in to read the taped printout, Cognitive Psychology, Dr. Claire Donovan, and left a thumbprint in the fog. Somewhere a bicycle chain clicked, a metronome for nervous energy. The hour was about to begin, the kind that ties a Tuesday to a decade and doesn't warn anyone it's doing it. He stood at the threshold longer than he meant to. Ethan Reed, 29, tall in a way that made door frames look smaller, held a spiral notebook to his chest. On the cover, a thumbnail photo was taped under clear plastic, a yearbook headshot labeled Claire Donovan, Psych 203-2006. The picture had bled at the edges from years of handling. The ink on a second note, just a number, 214, had smeared once under rain and been redrawn in darker pen. His thumb felt the ridge of it now. He found a seat near the back, same column, third row down, the place his mother used to choose when she was a student here, when she still believed that some professors could save you from yourself. The radiator coughed. Fluorescence flickered, then steadied. A silver pen lay abandoned beneath the lectern, University of Oregon logo worn to a ghost. It was the kind of object campuses swallow and return years later with a different story. Ethan kept looking at the door. When it opened, the room went quieter than clocks, shoes on tile, a plain black blazer, rain-beaded. The woman who entered carried nothing but a folder, and an unreadable calm. She was 38 at most, with the posture of someone who learned early that attention can be dangerous. She faced the students and wrote her name on the board, with the chalk angled like a scalpel. Dr. Claire Donovan. A chair scraped. Someone whispered, "Isn't that—" Outside, thunder laid a palm across the sky. "Welcome to Cognitive Psychology," she said, voice low, precise. We'll be talking about memory, how it works, how it fails, and how sometimes it's taken from us. Ethan's pen hovered. He had come for answers. He wasn't prepared for the fact that the person who might hold them had once vanished from this campus, and 19 years later just walked back into the same classroom as if time could be unlocked by a hinge. Claire placed the folder down. The silver pen caught the light. She paused as if surprised to see it. Her fingers brushed the logo, slow, like someone reading Braille from another life. The clock struck the half hour. Wind shouldered the windows. "Before we begin," Claire said, "I need to ask a question." She looked up, eyes scanning rows, until they landed on Ethan without lingering. "How many of you have lost something you cannot yet name?" Hands rose. Ethan stayed down. A beat. Claire nodded. "Good," she said. "That's where we start." The projector screen glided down with a soft shh, like tape rebounding in a VCR. On the first slide, a grainy photo of the same building, same door, from autumn 2006. The caption read, "Last Seen." Claire taught like a person rebuilding a bridge while walking across it. She wrote clean diagrams, encoding, storage, retrieval, then stood aside so the class could look at the empty spaces between the terms. She never over-explained. She asked questions like invitations and listened as if listening were a profession all its own. She had been a scholarship kid from Medford, daughter of a mechanic and a nurse who both believed in the dignity of quiet work. At 19, she'd kept a bullet journal before bullet journals had a name. Thin columns of to-do lists, margins of quotes, a habit of cataloging what the world forgot. Memory was a way to stay. 19 years had given her new edges. The blazer hid a scar at her wrist, pale as chalk. She didn't hide the scar exactly. She simply moved as if it had never asked for attention. Outside academia, Claire's life was spare. One-bedroom apartment near Amazon Park, a bicycle with a squeaky rear brake, a kettle that clicked when water finished waking up. She liked black coffee, rain at night, and running the Prees Trail at dawn when the fog lifted off like breath from a mirror. In a drawer she kept only necessities, passport, folded lease, a handful of photos with their backs blank. No frames, no clutter. Empty space has fewer questions. There were things she did not say. She did not say she still dreamed of the corridor outside room 214 as if it were a tunnel you could get lost in without moving. She did not say that the smell of floor wax could make her heart savage in her chest. She did not say that sometimes she wrote the number 2006 in the margins of her lecture notes, and then crossed it out as if numbers could be persuaded to behave. Her syllabus showed a neat spine of weeks, but she left certain days unlabeled. Guest lecture, TBD, field interview, weather permitting. She had learned to leave room for what returns. Emily Donovan learned not to cry during phone calls. The habit came from years of dialing offices, hospitals, friends of friends who were barely more than rumors, asking the same careful questions about her sister. She had turned persistence into a profession, journalist, Salem desk, with a byline that appeared often enough to pay rent and seldom enough to remain hungry. She kept a corkboard above her desk, the way other people kept family photos. On it, a beat-up map of Eugene with circles in red marker, the dorm where Claire lived sophomore year, the library stairwell camera that had glitched the week she went missing, Macmillan Hall, room 214, double-circled until the paper gave. A silver pen, same logo, different year, was clipped to the map's corner. Emily was 35 now, hair tight in a ponytail, because it stayed out of the way, not because it looked pretty. She ran on coffee and interviews. She had a rule, never assume malice when neglect could explain it. She had a second rule, don't accept neglect as an answer. On a gray Wednesday, a tip landed in her inbox with no subject line. Inside, a single sentence and a link to the university's staff page. Thought you'd want to see who's teaching cognitive psych this term, Emily clicked. The photo loaded slowly over weak Wi-Fi, pixel grid, then cheekbones, then eyes. Claire's eyes. The name beneath was both familiar and wrong at once. Dr. Claire Donovan. As if the years had never taken anything, as if a printer could put a life back on paper. Emily did not cry. She wrote the date in the top right corner of her notebook and circled it hard enough to bruise the page. She drove down I-5 with the heater blowing cold feet warm. On the passenger seat, a folder, police reports, the last voicemail Claire left. A photocopy of her student ID with the lamination peeling. An old cassette from their father's shoebox, Easter 2001, wrote in the cup holder because it made Emily feel like memory was something you could carry without it spilling. When she parked near campus, the rain had ceased and left the trees dripping like slow applause. She recognized the scent. Wet cedar, cafeteria grease, printer toner, a life turned back on like a building restored to power. She walked past flyers for study groups and tenant rights workshops and felt older than she wanted to feel. Outside Macmillan Hall, she stopped. Room 214's door wore a new coat of paint. The glass still remembered fingerprints. Through it, Emily saw a woman at the lectern, hand on a silver pen, as if the object were making a claim on her. The woman raised her head. For a split second, their eyes met. A mirror held up to 19 years of silence. Everything Emily had rehearsed, hello, why, how could you, collapsed into the only sentence the body knows by heart. Claire, she said, though the door was closed, though her voice was just breath. Inside, Claire's chalk paused mid-stroke. The white line broke. The class watched her watching something they could not see. Claire capped the pen, set it aside like a fragile argument, and said, "We'll continue next week." She dismissed them early and kept her gaze away from the door until the last backpack's zipper sound faded. Then she looked. The corridor was empty, echoing with departures. When Claire finally stepped into the hallway, Emily had already walked to the end and stopped under the exit sign's red hum. They stood like people at opposite banks of a river, measuring a current neither could name. "You're alive," Emily said first, voice sanded down to function. Claire swallowed. "Apparently." "Where have you been?" Claire glanced at the number stenciled on the door, 2 Verstehen. A muscle jumped in her jaw. I was hoping you could tell me." Emily's fingers tightened on the folder. 19 years, and that's your opening line?" Claire's breath smoked in the cool hall. "I teach memory," she said, almost apologetic, "not certainty." Emily let out a breath that was almost a laugh, almost a wound. The exit sign hummed. Somewhere deep in the building a door slammed like a gavel. Emily stepped closer. "Then start here," she said, tapping the silver pen in Claire's hand. "Whose is that?" Claire looked down as if seeing the object for the first time. The logo's green was nearly gone. A hairline crack ran through the clip. Her voice, when it came, was small. "Mine," she said. "I think." The elevator dinged open behind them, empty as an answer. As the doors slide shut again, a man in a dark coat passes with a folder labeled through the glass. Donovan Claire, closed. The next days moved with the clumsy grace of a film missing frames. Emily rented a week-to-week room at the Phoenix Inn and mapped a new routine. Mornings combing old case files at the county records office, afternoons sitting in the back of Claire's lectures, anonymous like a ghost with a notebook. Evenings walking the campus to see what the past looked like under different light. Small things began to misbehave in familiar ways. In room 214, the clock sometimes leapt 2 minutes ahead, then corrected itself. An error Ethan noticed because he time-stamped his notes by habit. In the hallway outside, a maintenance door fixed with a fresh padlock bore new scratches near the hinge, as if someone had tried to pry it quietly and lost their nerve. In the faculty lounge, a bulletin board posted a flyer for a research lab that no longer existed, Cognitive Affect and Memory Group, printed in an older font, corners sun-faded like a bruise that didn't fully heal. Ethan stayed after class one Tuesday. "Dr. Donovan," he said, polite, formal, "do you allow interviews for term projects?" "It depends on the project. I'm collecting oral histories on campus research culture in the early 2000s. He lifted his notebook like a credential. People who were around then, what they remember, what they forgot. Claire measured him. "You were what? 10 years old in 2006? 11. A historian with a long runway." "Personal runway," he said. His jaw worked. "My mother was here then." Claire's hand closed around the silver pen. "Name?" "Leah Reed." Silence widened, delicate and dangerous. "I don't expect you to remember," Ethan said quickly, "but if you're willing to talk on record, it could help other families." "The one's still waiting." Claire nodded, more to the idea of helping than to him. "Office hours," she said, "but I can't promise I'll be useful." "Sometimes," Ethan said, "useful isn't the point." After he left, Claire turned the pen in her fingers like a key searching for the right lock. From the window, she watched him cross the quad, step into rain without hurrying, and vanish near the library's shadow. She felt the old sensation she refused to name, being watched from the wrong decade. That night, Emily knocked on Claire's apartment door with take-out tie and a nervous smile that claimed neutral ground. They ate on the floor because there was only one chair. The living room was nearly bare, books stacked in clean columns, a single lamp, an unframed map of Oregon taped to the wall with blue painter's tape as if it were on trial. "I kept thinking you were dead," Emily said finally, when silence began to feel like a lie. "I kept thinking I should be," Claire answered, surprised at her own words, lighting her face, then dimming it. "That's not what I mean. I feel like someone pressed pause and left the room, and when they came back they hit play, but at a different speed." Emily nodded like a person who has carried answers around so long they have become questions. "Do you remember Dr. Hayes?" Claire's throat worked around the name. "Of course. He's still here, department chair now." Emily's tone neutral broke, and a grain of old anger showed through. "He told me to move on, said some people are right themselves and don't come back." "And yet," Claire said, spreading her hands as if to show her edges, "here I am." They ate in quiet for a minute. The lamp hummed gently, a sound like a secret wanting an exit. Emily reached into her bag. "I brought you something." She placed a cassette on the floor between them. Easter 2001. "Dad recorded over football games sometimes. But he labeled this and didn't touch it again. He said you loved the sound of the rewind." Claire smiled without showing teeth. "I liked that you could hear time move." She looked around the empty room. "I don't own a cassette player." Emily laughed short. "Of course you don't." She pulled a small portable deck from her tote, the kind that eats batteries and tapes. She clicked it open, set the cassette, pressed play. A soft hiss, a child's laughter, their mother calling someone for cake. Then, unexpected, the scrape of a chair and a man's voice clearing his throat. "Claire," their father's voice said, warmer than any memory could make it. "If you're listening to this later, remember, keep a copy of what matters somewhere no one looks." The tape clicked. A second or two of silence, then regular Easter noise again. Emily hit stop with her finger trembling. "Keep a copy," she repeated. What did he mean? Claire touched the silver pen to the floor like a divining rod. What matters? They didn't talk again for a while. They just listened to rain reorganize the night against the window, and to the quiet that comes when two people finally occupy the same moment after living in adjacent ones for years. The first note appeared on Thursday, printed in a font no printer uses anymore. Claire found it under her office door, a half-sheet folded twice, the fold crisp, the way librarians do it. Just a number, 214. And beneath it, in handwriting so small it seemed afraid of itself, "Bring the pen." She could have ignored it. Instead, she took the long way to Macmillan Hall and walked the corridor like it was a question. The maintenance door with the new padlock sat unremarkable among other doors that had forgotten their purpose. A camera watched without blinking. Claire stood where the note had led her and felt the floor tilt a fraction. Ethan turned the corner, almost collided, stepped back with both palms up. "Sorry, Dr. Donovan." "Don't apologize for walking," she said, but her voice held a strain he noticed. He followed her gaze to the padlocked door. "They closed that off when I was a freshman. Mold in the sub-basement, rumor says, or asbestos, or ghosts, depending who you ask." "No ghost," Claire said. "It's just poor ventilation." "Sure," Ethan said, but his eyes had lit at the possibility of a real story. "You okay?" Claire lifted the note as if it were a permission slip signed by a stranger. "Someone wants me to open an old room." "Do you have the key?" "Not anymore." They stood, the silence like scaffolding, holding up a crumbling thing. At dusk, Emily watched Dr. Robert Hayes exit the psychology building alone, coat collar raised, hands bare despite the cold. He paused to adjust his scarf, an old habit she remembered from interviews. When he reached his car, he looked back once at Macmillan Hall. The look wasn't nostalgia, it was inventory. Emily's phone vibrated with a text from an unknown number. "Stop!" She took a screenshot, added it to a folder labeled Threats, and texted Detective Laura Morales. The read receipt came fast. "Morales, meet tomorrow 9 a.m., Vero Cafe." Don't forward anything else by text. Morning arrived in sheets of rain. Morales had the bearing of someone who had learned to keep her coat dry, even in bad weather. She set a manila folder on the table. "I never closed your sister's case," she said by way of hello. "They did. I didn't." She slid a photocopy across. "Do you recognize the signature?" The page was a 2-line departmental memo from 2007, recommending that all materials related to the Donovan sophomore incident be archived under sensitive student matters. The signature at the bottom was familiar and not Robert Hayes, but the initials in the top corner were stranger, CAMG-C. Emily frowned. Cognitive Affect and Memory Group C. "What's C?" Morales tapped the tabletop thoughtfully. "Could be a location code, could be a person, could be the cold room in a building that doesn't have a cold room." Ethan's interview with Claire happened in a hush unusual for office hours. He asked about research culture, IRB approvals, data storage, the way people handled consent in 2006 with less rigor than they brag about now. Claire's answers were measured and careful until he mentioned his mother again. "She trusted a lab on the 3rd floor," he said. "They paid participants in bookstore credit. She came home once with a gift card and a migraine so bad she slept on the bathroom floor." Claire's stomach turned. The silver pen clicked, unclicked, clicked again. A small stutter that betrayed her calm. "What was the study?" "Memory consolidation," he said. "We think. She wasn't the kind to make copies, but she kept every receipt." He slid a crumpled bookstore slip onto the desk. The date winked like a broken light. OCT 17-2006. Claire wrote the date on a Post-it without realizing she'd done it. Her hand makes lists when her mind refuses to. She held up the note that had appeared under her door. "Someone wants me to bring this pen to room 214. Ethan blinked. "Why?" "I don't know," she said, "except that when you're missing the start of a story, you follow whatever thread doesn't break in your hand." That night, Emily dreamed of the tape again, their father's voice, the sentence about keeping a copy, and then something new, a rustle she hadn't noticed before, as if a second tape were layered under the first. She woke with a sentence in her mouth that wasn't hers. Not the door. What's behind the door? She texted Claire at 5:12 a.m. "Do not go alone." At 6:41 a.m., Claire stood in the hall outside 214, holding the pen like a pass. The building was half asleep, vending machines humming, custodial radio murmuring a song from another decade. The padlock on the maintenance door wore a smear of fresh oil. It had been opened recently. Footprints darkened the linoleum and then faded where the floor turned matte. She was about to turn back when Ethan appeared, breath visible, notebook under his arm. "You said not to follow threads alone," he said, although she hadn't said it. They stood on either side of the padlocked door, the pen cool in Claire's palm. From down the corridor, a key scraped a lock. The maintenance door shook once, twice. The padlock swung lightly and then dropped into a waiting hand. The door inched open. Inside is not empty, but ceiling-high stacks of banker's boxes, 2004, 2005, 2006, and a separate run. KMGA, KMGB, KMGC. One box bears a torn label, retaped Donovan C. The lights behind them flicker and go out. The air inside the storage room was stale, tinged with the smell of wet cardboard and old toner. Their flashlight beams crossed like interrogation lights on a crime scene no one had reported. Dust motes swirled, visible only when light touched them, tiny ghosts of paperwork. Ethan knelt beside the nearest box and brushed away the grit from the label. KMGC. Subject 06107. Claire's pulse quickened. Cognitive affect and memory group, she whispered. I worked as an assistant there. He looked up. You remember that? Not exactly. More like my body does. She traced the ink on the box. 117 was my lab key. They pried open a lid. Inside, file folders bound with red twine, cassette tapes numbered in pencil, and a single Polaroid of a room with mirrored walls. A woman sat in the reflection wearing hospital scrubs. Her face was turned away, but her hands were visible, palms up, a silver pen between them. Claire inhaled sharply. That's you, Ethan said. No, she said slowly. That's someone being me. A folder marked Participant Debrief. Confidential, held-typed transcripts. Each interview ended with a blank line where the interviewer's name should be. The final entry, Session suspended. Subject displays confabulation indicators. Recommend containment and memory reset procedure. Behind them, a box, toppled. Claire spun the flashlight. Nothing moved. Just paper sliding against paper. But on the concrete floor, boot prints pressed into the thin layer of dust led to the far wall, where a vent grill hung loose. Ethan crouched, ran a finger along the prints. Someone's been coming here? Claire's voice fell to a whisper, or never left. She found another file marked Donovan C. Temp withdrawal notice. The letterhead bore the university's seal and Dr. Robert Hayes' signature. But the date, October 18, 2006, was one day after her disappearance had been filed. She held it under the flashlight. He declared me withdrawn from the program after I vanished. Ethan frowned. That's impossible unless he already knew I was gone, she finished. They heard footsteps outside the door, muffled but deliberate. Claire switched off the light. The corridor beyond breathed once. Shoes on linoleum, then silence. When she turned the flashlight back on, a folded note rested on top of the nearest stack of boxes. She hadn't heard it fall. She unfolded it. The same small handwriting as before. You already copied it. Her throat tightened. Copied what? Ethan scanned the room. Your father's message, he said. He said, keep a copy of what matters. Maybe he meant you did. The next morning, Detective Morales joined them at a diner 2 blocks off campus. Steam rose from mugs and mixed with the smell of fried eggs. Morales listened without interrupting, flipping through phone photos of the documents they'd found. These boxes are off the grid, she said finally. If Hayes archived human subjects' data outside of approved storage, that's obstruction. If he erased a student to cover it... She stopped herself. I need the originals. Chain of custody matters. Claire hesitated. We didn't take anything. The lights went out. When we came back, the boxes were gone. Morales' eyes narrowed. Gone? Everyone, Ethan said, like someone had rehearsed the evacuation. Morales sighed, set down her coffee. Then we start where paper can't burn, digital backups. Every lab had them. Claire rubbed her temples. Those drives were password-locked. Then you better remember the password. That night she tried, laptop open, cursor blinking. She typed permutations of her old life. 117 Claire, Cognitive Vofampas, Hayes Lab, Easter 2001. None worked. Finally, she leaned back and stared at the blinking line until it looked like a metronome marking absence. A notification popped, a system alert she didn't trigger. External drive detected. Her hands froze. She hadn't plugged anything in. The laptop's drive list refreshed and showed a new directory. SCAMG recovered. Inside were digitized cassette recordings, file names structured like timestamps. The most recent dated OCT 17-2006 to Oswahan PM. She pressed play. Subject exhibits partial recall of sibling relationship. Procedure will continue with consent override. The voice was male, calm, deliberate, Hayes. A second voice, faint, trembling. Please stop, I remember enough. Then a sound, metal scraping concrete, a chair dragged backward, a gasp cut off mid-word. Claire's hand covered her mouth. The voice begging on the tape was hers. She forwarded the audio to Morales, heart thudding. Within minutes, her phone rang. "This is evidence of unlawful experimentation," Morales said. "We can't let him know you found it. Stay low." But Hayes already knew. At dawn, Claire's office door was ajar. Inside, her computer screen displayed a single line typed in the search bar. "Nice to see you back, Claire. Let's finish the study." The cursor blinked twice, then erased itself. She locked the door and sat on the floor until her breath steadied. The silver pen lay on her desk. She picked it up and noticed a faint seam near the clip she'd never seen before. With her fingernail, she pried it open. A micro SD card fell into her palm. Ethan arrived minutes later, rain in his hair. Morales said Hayes is leaving town. Claire held up the tiny card between two fingers. Not yet, he isn't. They inserted it into her laptop. Dozens of folders appeared, each named after a participant code. Among them, one marked 117 CD, inside MRI images, interview logs, a video file labeled Memory Reconstruction Trial, Prototype Copy Sequence. The preview frame froze on a familiar face, Claire's, sitting in a chair surrounded by monitors. In the background stood Robert Hayes, adjusting the focus. Ethan whispered, "He wasn't studying memory loss. He was editing it." Claire clicks play. The video begins with Hayes saying, "Replication test, subject identical to source, begin transfer." The screen flickers and two Claires appear side by side. The video timecode bled white digits in the corner, 10/17/2006, 14/14/02. A fluorescent buzz underscored everything. On the screen, Claire, 19, hair pulled back, eyes too alert, sat in a molded chair, hands cupped around the silver pen like a talisman. To her left stood Dr. Robert Hayes, sleeves rolled, a clipped calm. "Replication test," he said. "Subject identical to source. Begin transfer." The frame jolted. Another figure stepped into view, same height, similar build, hair pulled back the same way. The second woman wore Claire's green UO hoodie. Her face turned to camera. Ethan leaned closer, a breath snagging. "Mom," he whispered, "that's my mom." The audio caught a rough scrape, metal chair legs on concrete. Young Claire's voice broke, small and bright as glass. "No, she's not. Dr. Hayes, don't do this." Hayes' voice never changed temperature. "We are assessing whether autobiographical memory, carefully cued, will restructure identity markers. No lasting harm." He nodded to someone off camera. A syringe entered frame, then left it. Young Claire's eyelids fluttered. On screen, Leah Reed, 20 years old, college sweatshirt, the kind of beauty that lives in gestures, read from a stack of index cards while watching Claire's face. "Freshman dorm, you taped your class schedule inside the closet door. Your sister Emily hated the smell of floor wax." Room 214. She paused on the number as if tasting it. Hayes prompted, "Anchor with an object." Leah reached for the silver pen, rolled it between her fingers, placed it back in Claire's palms. "You wrote letters to your dad on this. Easter 2001. He told you to keep a copy. You did." The screen trembled as if someone touched the tripod. Claire jerked awake, the pen clutched. "Stop!" Leah's mouth tightened. "Let her go, Dr. Hayes." Hayes's face finally shifted, annoyance disguised as pity. "You will read, Ms. Reed." Leah did not. She set the cards down. "I'm done." She stood. "Delete my data." The camera pivoted just enough to show the room's other side. Two techs in scrubs, a bank of beige towers with LED dots blinking like city lights. A sign on the wall, Cognitive Affect and Memory Group, C Room. The C had been drawn over a previous letter in thick black marker. Hayes stepped between Leah and the door. The mic caught the breath through his nose. "We don't delete." He raised a hand. A tech moved. A red switch flipped. The screen strobed. Audio spiked into a smear and then settled in a hiss. Young Claire's body slackened. Leah took a half step forward, palm open, as if offering her own name for trade. The file ended in a stutter of pixels. The room around Claire and Ethan returned, the damp tick of rain at the window, the laptop fan rising. Ethan's knuckles were white. "He forced her to anchor your memories," he said. "Then he punished her for refusing." Claire swallowed. "If he couldn't overwrite me, he could bury me." Her thumb rubbed the micro SD, feeling its heat like pulse. Containment, memory reset. Those words in the file weren't metaphors. She opened another video. 10/18/2006, Uro 3 US 11. A hospital room this time, soft green walls, no windows. Claire lay sleeping, a butterfly of tape on her hand. Hayes's voice, off camera. "Temporary withdrawal initiated. Subject placed in clinical observation pending review." Another voice, a woman's, spoke a room number and a facility name bleeped out. Claire fast-forwarded 10 seconds at a time until the screen showed a corridor she didn't recognize. A metal door stenciled C-117 and a clipboard with signatures. One line read, "Hayes, R." Another read, "Donovan E. Guardian Acknowledgement." Claire froze the frame and zoomed. The signature was Emily's handwriting. The date was the day after Claire vanished. Claire stood so fast the chair bumped the wall. "He made you sign something." Ethan shook his head. Emily was only 16. Claire's phone buzzed. A text from Emily. "I need to tell you something before Morales does. Don't hate me. Vero Cafe, now." Vero smelled like espresso and wet wool. Emily sat with a mug clasped in both hands as if heat could argue with regret. She didn't look up when Claire slid into the booth. "I remember the clipboard," Emily said before hello. "I remember being told it was a protective hold. They said you'd had a breakdown. They said if I signed, they could keep you safe and call Mom." Claire's gaze didn't flinch. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I believed them," Emily said, "and because, when you never came back, they told me you'd left, that you didn't want us knowing where." A laugh like paper tearing escaped her. "I spent 19 years hunting a person I thought had chosen to be unfindable. I was a kid, Claire." The hurt and the apology sat between them like a third person. Claire reached across and touched her sister's wrist. "He forged meaning from your fear." "That's not on you." Emily's eyes glossed. "There's something else." She slid an envelope across the table. Inside, 2 photocopied forms, consent override authorization and subject reassignment, training purpose. Both bore Hayes' signature. One bore Leah Reed's. But next to Leah's name, in faint pencil, a second name had been written and erased. Donovan C. Morales arrived before the silence broke. She took in their faces. The papers spread like wounds. "We have enough for a warrant," she said. "University servers, Hayes' office, his home. But we need to move before he does." Her phone vibrated. She checked it, swore softly. He just booked a last-minute ticket out of PDX. Ethan's jaw set. Then we go now. Morella's caution warred with urgency. She nodded once. We go. They split. Morales to a judge, Emily to the Registrar Archives, Ethan and Claire to Macmillan Hall. The building at dusk looked like a person watching from behind curtains. Room 214 was locked. Claire's keycard failed. Ethan's student ID failed too. Claire stared at the door's old metal frame. The place paint didn't quite meet metal. People hide things where they once felt safe, she said, hearing her 19-year-old self. She knelt and ran her fingers under the lectern base through the gap where the wood met tile. Her nail caught tape. She peeled. A flat plastic cassette slid free, but not audio. A DV tape, labeled in block letters, copy. 214. Ethan laughed once, disbelieving. Your dad's advice. Keep a copy where no one looks. Claire weighed the tape. He must have helped me do this, or I helped myself because he taught me how. They needed a player. The media lab in the basement had one. The door was locked. The glass showed darkness. Ethan jimmied the crash bar with a laminated student schedule and a pencil. The latch gave with a tired clank. Inside, the DV deck's blue standby light glowed like a pilot flame. They fed the tape, pressed play. Static, then image. Room 214, 19 years prior. Hayes spoke to camera in that careful tenor reserved for donors and committees. Archival copy, he said, for internal review only. CANM Group, C. Behind him, the whiteboard read, prototype copy sequence. Bullet points followed. Sensory anchors, narrative restructure, reconsolidation window. The last line, containment, reset if required. Hayes stepped aside. The camera framed 2 chairs. In one sat Claire. In the other, Leah. Begin with cross-cueing, Hayes said, but the recording did not show compliance. It showed resistance. Leah removed the cards and slid them under Claire's chair. We stop here, she said. This is not consent. Hayes smiled without warmth. Consent can be inferred when harm is minimal. Leah's voice rose. Harm is not yours to measure. The camera wavered as if the person behind it exhaled. Off-screen, a door opened. Another figure entered, Dr. Robert Hayes again. For a second, 2 Hayeses existed, a mirror in motion. And then the view adjusted. The first Hayes had been a reflection in the observation window. The second Hayes leaned close to Leah and whispered something the mic didn't catch. Leah's face drained of color. She stood. She looked into the lens as if to find a future watcher. If you're seeing this, she said, put this where no one looks. The tape shook, then angled at the ceiling. Shoes scuffed. Someone cursed. The image cut out. Ethan stared at the frozen blue screen. She hid the tape here, and he never found it. Claire ejected the cassette, slid it into her bag. Because he stopped looking in places the students controlled. Above them, a floorboard creaked, not in the lab, but directly overhead in room 214. The ceiling vent sighed. Dust snowed. Claire looked at Ethan. He's here. A shadow crosses the frosted glass of the lab door. The handle turns. A familiar voice filters through. Class dismissed, Claire. Hayes stepped in, umbrella dripping like a metronome, coat collar up. He closed the door with 2 fingers and engaged the simple push lock, an old habit of small control. You were always clever, he said, gaze sliding to the DV deck, but clever isn't the same as right. Ethan moved instinctively, placing himself between Hayes and Claire. You used my mother. Hayes's expression flickered. Recognition, then calculation. Ms. Reed consented to a paid study. She consented to a survey, Ethan snapped. Not to you. Claire's voice was quiet, knife clean. You signed an override and called it care. Hayes set his umbrella in the corner, folded it, aligned it with the wall. Memory is ductile, he said, as if lecturing. You, of all people, should appreciate that. Trauma intrudes. If we can restructure a narrative, we can reduce suffering. You were promising. Promising for what? Emily's voice came from the door. She stood with the Detective Morales, both wet from the run across campus. Morales held a folded warrant in a plastic sleeve. Her badge flashed dull brass. For the donors, Hayes said, a small bitterness seeping. For the university standing. For grants that keep the lights on so idealists can moralize about consent in well-heated rooms. Morales' tone had the softness of a trap. Dr. Hayes, you're under investigation for unlawful human experimentation, evidence tampering, and falsification of records. We have a warrant for your office, digital devices, and any off-site storage. Hayes didn't move toward the paper. He looked at Claire instead. Your sister signed. Emily's breath hitched, then steadied. As a minor, under your narrative. Hayes smiled thinly. Narratives are what make people livable, Ms. Donovan. He looked back at Claire. Tell me you don't feel better not knowing. Claire's answer was immediate. I don't. Silence set like plaster. Somewhere a pipe clicked as it cooled. Morales stepped forward. We're done talking. Hayes' hand moved, fast, practiced, not toward the door but toward the DV deck's power strip. Morales was faster. She pinned his wrist to the table and cuffed him with a motion that looked like punctuation. Ethan stood very still, hands flat on the console, as if bracing the building against memory. Where is she? He asked. Where is my mother? Hayes's calm cracked. Not my department. Morales read him his rights. He listened with theatrical boredom, until she said, Anything you say can and will be used. He cut in, eyes on Claire. She was always the experiment, not the subject. Do you understand the distinction? Claire didn't blink. Yes? The subject is the one who survives. As Morales led him out, Hayes glanced at the silver pen in Claire's hand and, for the first time, looked almost afraid. The night thinned to a tired gray. Servers in the psychology building purred like contained weather while IT staff cloned drives and logged hashes. Paper carts rattled. The university council arrived with statements no one wanted to hear. Emily and Claire sat on the floor of Claire's office, backs against opposite walls, legs stretched, the kind of posture siblings use when childhood returns uninvited. Between them, the silver pen. I signed, Emily said, words careful. I needed you to know that I signed. Claire's eyes were red, not from crying, but from holding the option back. And I needed you alive enough to tell me. They stared at the ceiling a while. Claire spoke first. Do you remember Dad's shoebox of tapes? Emily smiled, the smallest possible. And how he rewound them to the exact start of each song. Do you remember what he wrote in the margins of his repair manuals? Everything. He didn't trust what he could forget. Claire rolled the pen toward Emily with a fingertip push. He taught me to hide copies. Maybe I taught myself. Ethan knocked and opened, careful, as if entering a chapel. He held a manila envelope. Registrar gave me this. I told them Morales would sign for chain of custody. They still made a copy for student wellness. His mouth twitched. Universities never met a euphemism they didn't like. Inside the envelope, Leah Reed's participation forms, a typed letter withdrawing from further studies, a complaint filed with the department chair, Robert Hayes, dated October 19, 2006. At the bottom, a note in pen, met with R.H. He said, You will forget this. A second sheet, torn at the top, bore only a locker number, basement B214, and a combination, 214. Claire said it aloud. 214. The number tasted less like a room now, more like a map. They found the locker beneath the media lab stairs, the old athletic type, half size, paint worn to powder on the edges. The dial turned with stubborn clicks. 2, 1, 4. The latch gave. Inside waited a shoebox, on the lid, in Leah's hand. If I disappear, tell my son I didn't agree. Emily's breath broke. Ethan didn't move for a full second. then lifted the box like a fragile organ. They set it on the concrete and opened it. There were photos. Room 214 from the hallway, the C-room door, a copy of the consent override, a selfie of Leah with Claire in the background taking the picture in the observation window, a meta record no one meant to make. There was also a small flash drive labeled, "For Emily." "Why my name?" Emily asked, voice thinned. Claire swallowed. Because Leah trusted the kid who called everybody back until someone answered. They plugged the drive into a lab machine. A single video lived there, grainy, dim. Leah seated cross-legged on a dorm bed, speaking straight to the lens. "If this reaches you," she said, "then I didn't get to finish what I started. Claire doesn't need a copy of me. She needs a copy of her life, her name, her sister, her records, somewhere safe. Room 205 isn't a classroom. It's a trap with a syllabus." She managed a flinty smile. "Put this where no one looks. Love to the stubborn ones." The file ended, replaced by the computer's reflection in the dark screen. 3 figures with the posture of people who have been handed a weight that doesn't crush, but changes the skeleton. Morales appeared in the doorway. "PDX detained Hayes at the gate," she said. "We have him." She took in the box, the drive on the screen. "And you have her." Ethan nodded, a motion so small it was almost a prayer. "She didn't agree," he said, and for once the sentence felt like a door unlocked from the inside. Morales's phone lights up. A call from county records. A long-term care facility confirms an admission from 2006 under a sealed student welfare code. The patient's alias? C. Donovan. Current status, alive. The facility sat east of town beyond a line of poplars shivering like nervous hands. It looked like a school built for silence. Low buildings, windows that didn't quite open, air that smelled of lemon cleaner, and old quilts. A receptionist led them down a corridor where each door had a first name and an initial, as if privacy required erasing last names, but not their shapes. Room C-117 held a bed, a recliner, a shelf with plastic picture frames containing the generic photos that come inside frames, mountains no one there had climbed. A nurse adjusted an IV pole that wasn't connected, a ritual left over from years when it had been. Near the window, a woman sat in a cardigan the color of oatmeal, hair silver at the temples, though she was not yet old. She held her hands like she was still protecting a pen. "Claire?" Emily's voice found a note it had never learned before. The woman turned. Her face was Claire's face, one notch softer like a photo printed on matte paper. Her eyes moved over Emily's features, then to Claire behind her, 2 anchors 20 years apart. "I've been waiting," she said carefully, as if words were stones placed on a river. The facility social worker used phrases like long-term observation and non-judicial hold and de-identification protocol. Morales used words like illegal and petition and release order. The nurse used the word that matters when the others fail, home. Claire knelt by the chair. "I'm here," she said to herself. Then, to the other self, softly, "You did not disappear. They put you away." The woman smiled like someone listening to a song they almost remember. "I kept a copy," she said. Emily's laugh curled into a sob. "Of course you did." Paperwork took hours, the kind where signatures require witnesses, where time moves like honey but still moves. At the end, the social worker placed a small envelope in Claire's hand. "This has been in her file for years," she said. "No one opened it because no one knew who you were." Inside lay a Polaroid of 2 girls on a porch. Emily, 16, jaw tilted stubborn. Claire, 19, making rabbit ears behind her sister's head. On the back, in young Claire's sharp mill pen, "If I forget, remember us." CC weeks later, room 214 filled again. Students, raincoats slung over chairs, notebooks open. The clock ticked like it believed in minutes. The projector hummed. At the lectern, Dr. Claire Donovan rested a silver pen beside her notes. A second Claire, no longer a patient, a person again, sat in the front row near Emily and Ethan, hands unhidden, cardigan traded for a green hoodie. The university had issued statements, and then better statements. Hayes's case moved like all cases do, too slow, and then suddenly. Claire cleared her throat. "Today," she said, "we begin with the ethics of memory, not the abstract, the human." She wrote on the board, encoding, storage, retrieval, responsibility. "People think memory is a filing cabinet," she said. "It's not. It's a story we keep editing. Sometimes we edit to survive. Sometimes someone edits us. The difference is consent." She paused, let the sentence sit in the room until it became part of the air. "In this class, we'll learn the science," she added, voice steady. "But I hope you also learn the sentence that changed my life. Keep a copy of what matters somewhere no one looks. Not because you should distrust the world, though sometimes you should, but because your life is yours. The story is yours." In the back row, Ethan lifted his phone and typed a message to himself he would not delete. "Tell her I forgive us." He looked at the woman in the hoodie, his mother in her 20s, and then at the woman at the lectern, his mother's friend in 2 decades of recovery, and felt the strange mercy of complicated truth. Class ended with the usual shuffle and one unusual thing. A line of students who wanted to say, "I've lost something," and "Me too, and thank you." Claire listened without fixing. She understood listening can be a kind of release order. Later, they walked out into Eugene Drizzle, 4 across. Emily, Claire, Ethan. The city smelled of coffee and wood smoke. A train called from far away. At the campus gate, Claire stopped and looked back at Macmillan Hall the way people look at houses they no longer live in. She didn't feel triumph. She felt something cleaner, like the first deep breath after a cast comes off. Emily nudged her. "You know you have to end your next lecture with a line they'll write down." Claire smiled. "I know." That night she wrote it, pen scratching in a composition book that would not be archived anywhere but her apartment. She would end with the sentence she wished someone had said to her at 19. Some stories are written twice, once by fear and once by truth. Start the second draft whenever you're ready. And the next morning, in room 214, with the rain stitching silver lines across the glass and the clock counting faithfully, she began class by asking the question she had asked on her first day back. "How many of you have lost something you cannot yet name?" Hands rose. "Good," she said, and the room leaned forward. "That's where we start." After class, facility records call. A second sealed alias from 2006 has been flagged for notification. L. Read, suggesting Leah may also be alive under a different code. The screen fades to black on the single word, "Found."